Yes, welcome back, Looney listeners. You are listening to Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast. This is episode 284, and we are rounding out our coverage of the Moon Knight TV show from Disney Plus. You are with your High Priestess Conchu Ray. Hello, everyone, and of course, we are live streaming this panel discussion. And joining me for this sojourn into the weird and wonderful of episodes 5 and 6. I'll go around here clockwise. We have Daniel doing one of the top tier patronies. Daniel, welcome.
Greetings, denizens of the night.
Excellent. Well, I should call you Mr. Knight. I'm sorry. We also have the power of Chad. Chad, how are you going?
Peachy Keen.
Excellent. Peachy Keen last time as well. Very consistent. I love it. And joining us for the first time, a valued patroni, a valued loony as well in our group, in our community. Mario, I'm just going to call you Digicom because I think that's a pretty cool nickname you got there. Mario, welcome.
Thanks.
Welcome to ITK.
And thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I was looking forward to. I mean, Mario, listeners would know, has been leaving some great feedback. So it's a real pleasure to have Mario on the actual panel discussion to get face to face to talk about these two episodes. And rounding off this little merry band of loonies, none other than Drew Turntables Tombs. How you going, Drew?
Good. Hello, fellow priest of Khonshu.
Drew's come from a long, oh my god, 6-hour drive. Did you say?
Yeah, man. This is 6 hours yesterday. Played, woke up, and drove 6 hours back. So I'm dragging, but I'm good.
Holy moly! And we have some early comments coming in. A huge hello to Joel and to CMK7, Chris, beep boop, and an unknown, which is fantastic. You are mysterious, as is Moon Knight. Now, guys, before we start, of course, a big thank you to all the patronies. You know who you are. I'm looking at you. A big thank you to all the patronies and loonies that contribute to the show. You really do make it the community it is. So a huge thank you, and let's keep on going. Hey, I mean, like, the TV show's done, but we've got comics, we've got everything galore. There's plenty to talk about. Also, our principal sponsors, Drew Tombs, Daniel Doing, and Frank the Think Tank. Big shout out to you. CLZ Comics from Collectors and Dreamland Comics from Schaumburg, Illinois. So, guys, let's get into it. What we're going to do, I mean, as loonies know, Rebecca and I did a raw reaction episode to the episodes, but we have a panel discussion now. We want to basically know what all the other loonies kind of think. So we've invited a lot of loonies on board here, and there's plenty of feedback as well. So we won't be able to get through it all, but we'll choose a fair few just to see what everyone in the community has thought of the last two episodes of this TV series. I don't know, guys. I'm going to give Mario first dibs. He's the newest member on this panel. Mario, overall impressions, like, what did you make of, I guess, episodes 5 and 6? How did you see the show round out?
Well, like pretty much all of us, I suspect, episode 5 left me with a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
The big one, of course, is, what's real, what isn't, what exactly is going on. But also the question of how are they going to resolve all of the loose ends, What's going to happen to Mark? What's going to happen to Steven? What's going to happen to Khonshu? Is Harrow going to win? And I was pleasantly surprised that despite the short runtime of the final episode, they did manage to fit all those answers in. With a few exceptions, and of course, one big exception, but I'm sure we'll get to
that. Pardon me, I've already started coughing. Murray, so they did fit it all in. Did you find it rushed at all? The last I mean, we're going to bounce to the last episode now. Might as well. I mean, did you find that too packed, full of information, or how did you see the pacing of it?
It was a little bit rushed in the sense that not all of the geography is entirely clear. For example, at one point, they've defeated Harrow, but now they have to defeat Amit. And really, between scenes, they go from the streets of Cairo to the Great Pyramid. Now, the Great Pyramid itself is only about 10 miles out of the city, but there's no real connective tissue there. It's not like they grabbed a car or something. So you sort of get the idea that, boom, they're here, boom, they're there. That part felt a little bit rushed.
Yeah.
The ending, after the fact, after the good guys have won, apparently, is definitely a bit rushed in the sense that we don't know what happens to Layla. We don't know how they got back to England. We just know that it has happened. So they kind of tied up the ending a bit quickly.
But did they ever leave?
The final battle, I think it was paced pretty well.
Yep. Yeah, Daniel, you did say, did they ever leave? I mean, again, you could interpret it that way, right? Again, Stephen just waking up. But what is everyone's take then? Because there was a bit of ambiguity with a lot of the things towards the end. For me, I'm sorry, Loonies, we are jumping into the last episode, but it's hard not to,
It really is.
So, yeah, I mean, like the thing with Harrow, his bloodied feet in the ward with Mark. What does that mean? I mean, is that a manifestation of Mark's thoughts about Harrow? But if it is, then again, what does that mean? Is Harrow truly beaten in Egypt? And when we see him,
I've had a lot of friends asking me about it, like specifically the ones that haven't read the comics, and the best way I've been like responding, because I'm almost, as a longtime fan, I'm just as in the dark as they are as to what's real and what the ending meant. And the best thing I've come up with is they tried to do what a lot of the comic runs have done, specifically like the Lemire run, which they pulled a lot of this from, never really says if that's real at all. You don't really know at the end of it if he's destroyed Khonshu, if it was all just metaphorical, yada yada. And I think the show did something similar, whether it worked or not, because I think it was a nice way for them to have a cop-out if there is no season 2 or no follow-up. It can all just be in Mark's headspace. But also, if they do continue it, then you could just say that he popped back into his mindscape for a minute. I don't know why. I think the cutting, that was where it did feel rushed. I liked how they did it, but it was very jarring, probably on purpose, but like, I think it could have taken, they could have done another 10, 15 minutes to make it a little less awkward. But I think that was part of the purpose of it, was to make it feel like if this doesn't continue, then you can just leave it super ambiguous.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I feel.
Theory about the Dr. Harrow situation, but it's just a theory. I rewatched 5 and 6 in preparation for this panel. And more so, in 5 and at the end of 4, and more clearly in episode 6, there seems to be a disconnect between Mark in Dr. Harrow's office and Mark and Stephen in the psych ward. Those don't really seem to be the same.
Okay, right.
When Mark and Stephen are together, that's clearly on the boat with Bark, to be mythologically accurate, in the Duat. But when Mark is apparently alone with Dr. Harrow in his office, that doesn't seem to be the same place. You actually see him switching from the psych ward with Stephen to Dr. Harrow's office. In fact, Dr. Harrow talks about, and now you're telling me the story about seeing a talking hippopotamus. Yep. So
I get you.
And I can't really justify this because there is some blurriness at the end of episode 4.
Yep.
Is that Dr. Harrow's office is in Stephen's mind. And those conversations are Stephen's so nice. I
think everyone loves him.
Mind. And it's him trying to make sense out of himself and the situation. The psych ward, on the other hand, when he's running around with Stephen and Tauret and sand zombies and going through his memories, that's the Egyptian afterlife.
Yes.
Like I said, there's a little bit of blurriness in the transition, but
Okay, so I see what you're saying. Like his organizing principle and the experience he would do what aren't necessarily, they're not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah, it's
that's a good way to look at it.
I think that's a great way to look at it. It's an afterlife, as Tawaret says.
They were clearly intertwined, like while those things were happening, but they're not the same place.
They're not the same, yeah, exactly. But the organizing principle, because it's very much just Mark and Stephen, Mark and Dr. Harrow in there, so that could very much just be exclusively his mind, whereas there's a bit of bleed over with
the one detail that hooked it for me, Dr. Harrow never leaves his office.
Yeah, he seemed very, not that he needed to, but he seemed very unable to pursue Stephen, and even his guards didn't. Well, I guess the guards did chase after him when they started running down the hallway, but they never popped back up again when he just started exploring his memories. So it you know, if it is just his organizing principle, like you could see that he started to exert some sort of control over it, especially with that final scene. But it is very interesting that Harrow's not able to leave there, and he clearly starts to see things how he wants to see them. Obviously, it still leaves it very ambiguous, but I thought it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And another thing that kind of supports that is if you look at the lighting when he's in Harrow's office, it's a little bit too clean. As opposed to when he's like in the rest of the psych ward where the lights don't seem to be working quite right. It seems like it's a little bit sharper in his mind than in the actual afterlife.
That's good. Chad, what? Sorry, Chad. What did you make of? What do you think of this theory? I guess between the afterlife and the psych ward organizing principle.
I'm pretty much on track with that. But there's also another little twinge I have added to that. Is the warehouse at the very beginning has a lot of the same themes going, where it's like you have to be granted entry to certain pieces, and you know it's another part of that entire scheme where he got in contact with the rest of his own self at that point.
Oh, okay. So you're saying that storage, the warehouse place?
I think it might not actually exist.
Oh, okay.
Ooh.
Well, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, it's such a hard thing, isn't it? Because you start questioning, Stephen's life actually in general. I mean, he's talking to his mum as well, which apparently I read. I don't know if you guys saw in an article by Muhammad Diab. There was a scene that they cut, and Muhammad wanted it. He really wanted it in the show. It was Mark/Stephen meeting his mum in this white space, and there's a confrontation or just a meeting between them. That
would have been interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, that kind of being thrown up in the air, we don't know really what's real, and I guess that's the actual point, and it makes it really kind of compelling, us deciding what or discussing what the hell has happened, because it's not as clear cut as you think. But
it's interesting to see the division in that too, because like as comic readers, that's like a whole lot of fun. But I think when you're seeing it in front of you with like live action, you maybe subconsciously expect more concrete answers. And it's even as someone who like lives for this type of weird, ambiguous mystery stuff, I was like, no, I want to have a better idea what's actually happening. But like learning to let yourself be okay with that, that's part of why we like the character in the comics to begin with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's go back to episode 5, right? So at the end of episode 4, we're met with Mark and Stephen seeing Tawaret, and obviously that fantastic ending, which everyone seemed to love. That's such a turn.
I love her ears. Did you notice her ears?
I love it. Just flicking away.
Are perfect.
Yeah. But we get more of an explanation, and that's where we kind of are coming from, where Tawaret actually says, this is an afterlife. It's not the afterlife. She mentions the ancestral plane, which, of course, is the Black Panther, Wakanda. Beautiful little connection there. But then episode 5 was I thought was the best, would have to be the best episode for me out of the 6 episodes. We get everything. Yeah, we get an explanation. I think I listed it down with Rebecca. There's like the Mark origin, the Stephen origin, the Merc origin, the DID origin. We get it all, and it's done really well. Albeit Rebecca did say she was a little underwhelmed at the Jewish representation, which is fair, I guess. But you know, it wasn't
I think
a bad
they did
thing.
enough to get it across, but like without
Yep.
hammering it home, you know.
Yeah.
Well,
true.
Like they could,
and we can get into
they
this
could definitely
too, 'cause this
like
kind
do
of
the
goes
story
in.
where,
Sorry, Daniel.
Sorry.
like they could definitely do the story later on where like Mark's dad dies and like there's like the last story from the Doug Mensch run where Mark has to like go home and bury his dad, and like that could be a whole can of worms to open up for like do like a really good story like set in like balancing the faith he grew up with the faith that he's serving now.
So
Yeah.
I think,
no,
I think that might kind of go into some of these comments that were left here, and it was a point that involves both 5 and 6 that I was going to try to bring up early on. So Joel Lewis said here, the series, he likes the series overall pacing, except the last episode which felt very fast. And then he said, I don't know that I needed a whole another episode, but I wanted it to breathe a bit more. CMK7 said that he was really impressed by how much they were able to get into the final episode, but it might have been better spread over 2. So something I've been talking with a lot of my MCU watching friends about is, and something I've seen a lot of people complain about who do like YouTube things for these series, is this 6-episode arc setup that Disney has for the Marvel shows, or at least I think all of them so far. I think She-Hulk's getting more than that for some reason, but
okay.
What I've realized is it works really. A contained 6-episode arc works really well for characters that we already know. For WandaVision, it was the perfect amount. It might have got a little rushed towards the end, but it worked. For Loki, it was totally fine. It was more than enough to fit in what they needed to fit in. But like you started seeing it hiccup with Hawkeye, even though Hawkeye is very established, they were bringing in Kingpin, they were bringing in Echo, and by the end of 6, it was rushed. And even though I loved it, like you could tell that the introduction of new stuff was causing them to squeeze too much in towards the end. And the problem that we ran into with Moon Knight is, even though I think the show was fantastic, it didn't, like, they did squeeze in everything they needed to squeeze in. It was impressive that they covered everything. But if you're introducing a new character and you really want to get people to care about him, which they did, you're also going to tiptoe around. It's the same problem we were running into throughout the whole season, people complaining there wasn't enough Moon Knight. Well, how much more Moon Knight could you have squeezed in while also getting the same emotional effect from the storytelling they were doing? I think they're going to need to start switching that up for future series that are focusing on new characters. Otherwise, they're going to run into a problem where a lot of casual viewers aren't going to lock on to these the same way, and a lot of comic book people are going to be upset because there's details you don't have time to touch on. And the reason I thought to mention this is the Jewish representation point. Like Daniel said, they did enough to get it across without hammering it in, and they left it so you could come back to it. But also, how much more time could they have focused on it, and how much more effort could they have put into something like that? I know they could have, but with the time that they had. And I think that's just something I'm interested to see if with future series, if they allow more time and more budget for these new characters, because it doesn't necessarily work with somebody that doesn't already have 10 years of history in the movies.
Yeah, that is a good point. I mean, because I can only just imagine what non-comic book fans, what they would think of, or say Kingpin introduced in Hawkeye and not having watched Daredevil at all, not knowing him. It's a little bit weird. It would be weird, but we see him and go, oh, awesome, he's from Daredevil, and like he's got all this history with it. So yeah, that is a definitely a good point. I saw also
problem. Sorry.
Yes. Oh no, sorry, go on. It's going, Mario.
There's a problem I've seen in comics fandom, not only related to the MCU, but just in the comics in general. And there's a bit of a tension between what you need to know to understand a story and enjoy it, and what you'd like to know to understand a story. Mark's Judaism has never really been a huge part of the character. There have been multiple arcs where it's not even mentioned. There have been some very good arcs where it has been mentioned. But the fact that he's Jewish doesn't inform the plot as often as the fact that he has DID or the fact that he's an ex-mercenary.
Exactly.
Like Kitty Pryde, for example, of the X-Men, where her religious faith has been part of her character more than once. So the fact that people want more representation is perfectly understandable and perfectly valid. But do we need to put that in the story, possibly at the expense of something else? That's a hard question to answer, and there really isn't an easy one.
Yeah, you're right. And again, I think Daniel, as Drew alluded to as well, you pretty much kind of hit it on the head. There is an opportunity to explore that aspect of Mark. I mean, where we've got it's very much the Egyptian angle, of course, and DID in this season. You could really pick, I think, between the three. And I know the Judaism doesn't run all the way through the Moon Knight run, but it's still there. Like I still see it as a big part of Moon Knight. So there's an opportunity there, and maybe they just didn't have enough space in the season to actually fit that in. But yeah, it's good that it was, the
I'm
little
very
Star
happy
of David
that they put it in there.
Yeah,
and I think they
just
did a really good job with a lot of that for his characters. Like, they did a very good job of giving you all, like, unless I missed something or like they missed something, you really got the gist of everything that Mark Spector has going on around him without them hammering any one thing other than the DID for too long.
Yeah.
And it did leave a lot of opportunity for however they continue his character to deep dive more of that stuff individually and, with more time allotted to it. Now that we've gotten the whole general origin covered.
Yes. And I think back to, I think back to something interesting that I noticed. If you look back at the one issue of Moon Knight, I believe it was issue 8, where he's actually talking with his therapist, Dr. Sturman, and she's like, well, how do you feel? You were raised by your father was a rabbi and you serve an Egyptian god. I think there was a very interesting opportunity to see more of that dynamic with this episode, because you see through Mark's eyes how Judaism, in how he would interpret it, it's failed him. Judaism, his brother died, his mother hated him, his father did nothing because, being a man of peace, you can't really do anything. Whereas he is then offered another option with an Egyptian deity who's like, be my son, be my fist, and you will have not only vengeance for others, but for yourself as well. So, I think somewhere deep in the back of his mind, just like how he explains in the comic, his father's faith may have taken him out of Egypt, but his new faith brought him back and gave him justification for his anger.
Yes. Well, absolutely. I mean, Conchi's given him free reign, hasn't he? for meting out vengeance. So it is interesting. Going back to episode 6 as well, I mean, Drew, you did compare it to the other shows. I did see and you see it online as well, the similarity about the last episode being the all the fireworks and the big showdown, which it did seem very MCU-y.
But I will say, here's the thing: I love MCU, and that's we've gone on this before, and I've been on I that's where I come from. I dabbled in the comics when I was young, but the MCU's what got me to really dive back into them. And I know how it all goes. You're watching comic book movies, and if you're going to be surprised by a big bombastic comic book ending, I don't know what you're watching them for. But I definitely think in comparison to some of the other ones, they did it really well. And as far as I don't know, the fight was really cool. It felt Moon Knight despite the real big bombastic parts of it. And
especially the truncheon.
The truncheon fight, the whole Steven, that whole fight scene after just rewatching it, it's I think one of the more better choreographed MCU finales I've seen in a long time. But I mean, they did squeeze a lot into it, but I thought that it was pretty solid for an MCU finale.
Especially switching between your main character between two costumes in the midst of a fight. Just the choreograph and the cinematographer and the stunt coordinator, they deserve the highest praise for pulling that off.
Yeah, there were a couple of really good moves in there. I'm just going to call out, the one that you see in the trailer where he falls back onto the hood of the car and he throws But then he kind of like twists, and it's all like a real person doing. He like twists, and it's a really neat way that he kind of gets himself into a good position again. I've never seen kind of anything like that. I thought that was really cool. And of course, Stephen being a lot more adept with fighting. I think Rebecca mentioned it does make sense because he did say in episode 5, you know, if Mark's got it like under control, then I've got it too. So I think they become closer together in that sense. Like Steven's, like just because my mind's different, my body is essentially the same as Mark. So I don't know
And
if you call that muscle memory
that's
or
so cool. Like I know some people have complained about the corniness of him hopping back and forth between the altars like that, especially with the symbiote Moon Knight suit. But like I think it's awesome for a live take on the character not needing to go change his clothes in the trunk of a car. Why not? If you're already going to have the suit be that malleable, go all in on it. I think it's really cool, and it creates for some really awesome fight choreography that they can get into, and a lot of his personalities working together in a way that I don't know. It excites me. I can imagine if you have that, you know, as if you are part of a DID system, I'd be interested to know if you find that like fun to watch, because I think it's pretty cool. And one thing about that fight that I was going to point out, the 2 super Moon Knight parts, when Steven finishes that whole series of whooping ass, and then he like throws Harrow into the little laundry room and goes and does the suit fix.
That was very cool.
That part's super badass. But Harrow immediately takes him and throws him into another building, into a wall. That was wildly Moon Knight. And then he comes out of that wall with the grappling hook and a kick to the chest, which was awesome. CMK7 and Joel both just brought up.
I think they were just they both just said that as well.
Moon Knight.
Yeah.
So like him taking some hits and being a little bit of an idiot, like it felt like a Moon Knight.
Him taking hits, I mean that really is Moon Knight, isn't it? So,
yeah, exactly.
But Chad as well. I mean, what did you make of the extravaganza that was the fight?
I think the choreography was pretty much on par with Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Just the intricacies.
Especially Layla's flying moves. It was very Falcon, but she had her own style, which was cool.
Yeah.
I thought Layla looked bloody kick-ass.
I love her so much.
When she had that pose, like, you know, with the downlight on her as she came out of the rubble.
Like, and she like flicked the wings.
First wing pull with like her swords.
She's got a little bit of a smirk on her face. It's just it's perfectly shot, I think. Like you couldn't get any better shot than that.
So in case we don't come back to it, can I comment on her like suit reveal real quick?
Yeah, sure.
So I've seen a lot of people being like, okay, well, she's Ta Werrett's avatar. Why does she look like she's, you know, wings, and why does she have the Scarlet Scarab get up? I had this fun little theory, because when she's talking with Ta Werrett, and it's one of my favorite parts of the episode, she goes, "Your dad would be so tickled to see you right now." And she goes, "My father?" And Ta Werrett's like, "Yeah, I met him before when I took him to the Field of Reeds," implying that she knows her dad. And that's when she says, "I had an idea for an awesome costume." So part of the thing with the wings, scarabs obviously have wings, but like Diab said in an interview that they originally were going to have Isis be the goddess, not Ta Werrett. So that kind of leaked into it. I have this theory that Ta Werrett knew about her being called his little scarab and all that cute stuff, and she fashioned the suit for her based on like her dad, and not Ta Werrett as a hippo goddess. So I don't know. I thought like the whole suit reveal, even though it didn't make sense to being Ta Werrett, it was still super cool. And then it like felt more sentimental when I rewatched it and heard the comments about her knowing her dad.
Yeah.
The only other thing I would bring up is that Moon Knight doesn't look much like a baboon, which is what one of country beasts, along with some sort of a bird.
That's subjective, though, Mario.
Calling him bird-like is a bit of a stretch. And also, I did take a close look at her costume in one of the shots where the only one who was well lit, and the scarab on her chest is in fact red. So she is in fact wearing a scarlet scarab.
Yes. And a shout out as well to Looney Olivia. She posted something. I'm sure you guys may have come across it. She kind of dove into the look of Layla's costume, and it very much harks back to Mart, one of the deities as well. And Olivia, I can't remember exactly how she said it, but apparently it's regardless of if it's a scarab or not. That's why she has these wings, and I think they're meant to be like bird wings. They're not really meant to be scarab wings, but that's very synonymous with a lot of representation of Egyptian deities. So
yes.
I think that's where it's kind of come from. But if you look at, Olivia posted it up on Facebook. There's an image of, I think, Mart with very similar garb to Layla's. So I think that's probably where they got it from as well.
Olivia's Facebook interactions and posts have been great too. A lot of really informative stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Hoping to get Olivia on some future episodes, understanding, I guess, Egyptology, and also as well Nate. I think Looney Nate as well. He studies it as well. He's actually contributed a lot to understanding
weird
it more.
question from listening to your guys' take on episode 5, the reaction episode. Is Olivia Rebecca's friend, or is Olivia just somebody who also knows a lot about Egyptology?
Oh no, yeah, I think they're both separate. Yeah.
Okay, I figured as much. I didn't. All the information Rebecca was getting from her. I don't know if it was a museum friend or who it was, but a lot of really interesting takes from somebody who actually knows historical. That whole side of it.
I mean,
I've got some notes on Egyptology discussing the balancing of the scales. But of course, I'm just a talented amateur. I don't study this stuff.
Oh no, definitely love to hear about it, because that is a big part. Again, guys, I'm bouncing back to episode 5 as well, because I know we're quite fixated with the beautiful finale, which we should talk about. But episode 5 about the balancing of now one of the big things. How did you guys feel? There was a lot of conjecture towards the end of episode 5 about the scales balancing. Where is Jake? Does it mean that Stephen, that identity has to die in order for someone to be worthy to go to the field of reeds? It actually posed a lot of these questions, which potentially was not a good look for the portrayal of DID. But I don't know. Take us through what you guys were thinking during episode 5, and then the subsequent, I guess, explanation.
I remember I talked with you and Rebecca on Facebook about that after listening to your guys' take on it, because I felt the same way Rebecca did on my first watch, where I didn't mind it necessarily, but it didn't stick with me quite right. And then I rewatched it again, and the way I kind of took it is when Stephen did his whole, Mark had already accepted that Stephen was important to him. He fought for him, and then Stephen saying, if I'm him, then I got this too, and jumping into the fight. I feel like that was this, to me, it was him. Mark had accepted Stephen as part of him, and Stephen at that point was accepting that he, despite learning that he wasn't necessarily, his history wasn't real, that he was still part of Mark, and that he was happy with that. To me, it wasn't that Stephen had to die. It was that he was okay with what he was. Mark was okay with what he was, and they had come together. And then, I thought back to the parts in the Lemire run where Mark, like I mentioned to you guys, I think he makes the moon, the space Moon Knight, disappear. He kills the masked Moon Knight, and then he talks to Stephen, and they hash it out, and everybody disappears. And for a second, you're like, well, that's kind of a bummer that getting over his DID means getting rid of his alters. But they all come back later in the comic series, and they're like, we never went anywhere. That was you learning how to be one with us. So I kind of took it as that, where Stephen wasn't dying so that Mark could be whole. They were coming. It maybe just wasn't portrayed very well. But to me, it ultimately seemed very nice, because to me, it seemed like they were all coming together as one, and that's why he felt balanced.
I actually agree, but in order to explain my position, I have to read quite a bit. I don't know if you guys are up for it, but it kind of
sure.
on the Egyptian concept of the soul.
Yeah.
Again, I've only ever seen these written down, so if I mispronounce anything, I apologize. The ancient Egyptian concept of the soul had multiple parts, but I'm going to focus on 3 of them: the Ka, the Ba, and the Ib. The Ka is like the life force. It's the thing that makes you alive. The Ba is the personality. And inside the Ba'a is the Ib, which is the heart, which I'm pretty sure is what Taweret pulled out of their bodies and I suspect their bodies were their individual Ba. Because Mark has DID, he has one Ka, one life force, so one essentially animating spirit. But because he has multiple personalities, he has multiple Ba. And the concept of Mat, which you mentioned earlier, isn't about whether you're a good person or, for that matter, a sane person. It's about whether you're harmonious with the natural order of things. And one thing I noticed when I was rewatching it early today is that when the scales balanced out, there were two hearts on the scale. It wasn't Mark balancing the scale. It was Mark and Steven's hearts balancing the feather. So my theory, and this matches what Drew was talking about, is that the scales balanced not because Steven fell off the boat and got petrified, because Mark was accepting Steven as part of himself. They were working in harmony as they should be, as opposed to pulling in different directions because Mark doesn't trust Steven, he keeps secrets from Steven, Steven doesn't understand, Steven isn't really accepted. But once they've confronted all of that, the scales balanced. And just when that happened, Steven falls off the bloody boat. I think, and I agree that perhaps this could have been done better, I think the balancing really had nothing to do with Steven turning into a statue. I think the balancing happened because Mark and Steven were in harmony.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and I noticed today when I rewatched it, when Mark runs back to him and as he's freezing, their hands are over each other. You can see a glow between their hands, and what that glow is the heart becoming an entire whole heart. Yeah.
Look, the way that I kind of perceived it as well is that I think Rebecca and I discussed it as well, is that the balancing the scales, and it sounds very similar to what you were saying, Mario. It's not so much the mental aspect of the individual, but I literally took it as the heart, because that's what is on the scale. So regardless, and it is funny enough that, or unfortunate that Steven goes overboard just when the scales balance, but it was a measure of, they were starting to be a little bit more in sync with each other. And so, their hearts were kind of in the right place. That's kind of how I saw it, but I'm glad that you've elaborated, Mario, because that makes absolute sense as well, but being more harmonious rather than being this identity needs to go. But totally agreed.
Really
I think
cool insight with the Egyptology stuff, like the Ka and the Ba and stuff like that. I hadn't even thought to look into that, and that's more of those details that could be explored with more time. But
yeah, for sure. I just wanted to call out as well, because CMK7 as well, he totally agreed with you, Mario. Steven dying was not what was balancing the scales. It was Steven sacrificing himself to save Mark, proving to Mark that he isn't a worthless piece of shizzle. So I know. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, absolutely. So I think and I think that was actually kind of verified in a way in episode 6 when Mark he started off hating Steven or wanting to suppress him, and we see his conversation with Taweret at the Field of Reeds is that he'd give up this place in like heaven or this paradise to actually go back and get Steven, because he needs him. Like he says as well, you're my real superpower. So he's never alone. He actually relied so much on Steven's outlook as well. So I think in that sense, that shows the synergy that they have together. Like he would not want to continue without Steven, whether or not that meant to be in eternal hell or whatever. So in the sands. But Chad, did these form questions for you as well?
A lot of questions that exist for me just kind of rely entirely on whether or not there's a season 2. Because if not, I can just be like, okay, and just cut that off right there. But
right.
There's gonna be a season 2. This thing was way too good for them to be like, oh yeah, we're just gonna leave it. Because Loki was supposed to be like a sort of one and done, and then they were like halfway through and like, oh crap, we've got like gold here. No, there's gonna be a season 2. So
Yeah.
there's definitely going to be a season 2. They're just going to be coy about it and try to and just like kind of string us along until we start to lose hope. And they're like, oh, guess what? Season 2, guys.
I'm also
I
wondering if
did research before this
Oh,
panel.
sorry.
There's a reason why they didn't announce season 2. They're putting Moon Knight up for the best limited series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if it's a best limited series, it can't have
A season 2.
season.
Yeah, that's
It can't.
true.
And that, in fact, what happened with Loki is they were going to submit it as best limited series.
Right.
And they put that little note at the end, Loki season 2 coming out, and the Academy said, no, you can't be a limited series. You're going to have a second season. So as long as it can be submitted as a limited series, they can't announce a second season.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think Multiverse of Madness coming out the following week. I think it might be a marketing thing too, where they wanted to switch gears straight to Multiverse of Madness push.
That's true.
Because
that
then people can ride out watching the finale for the next couple of weeks, and I wouldn't be surprised if they announce something in the next few weeks while they've given people time. Because like it's the MCU, like they can let people dangle for a while, and they're gonna come back.
Yeah, and I think Chris makes a good point here. Yeah, just let Oscar get the Emmy, and then, they can pull it. He deserves it, you know. I think he's phenomenal. He's acting. You know, I'd always heard about Oscar Isaac. You know, he's a generational actor and all that, and I'd never really seen much of his stuff. And you know, albeit this is a comic book superhero TV show, but man, I mean, yeah, his acting chops were pretty good. And I'm not even a connoisseur when it comes to how good acting is, but you can really see it. Like he's really, yeah. And he mentioned as well that although it was the hardest, I think, few months that he's ever undergone, he enjoyed every minute of it. Like he was enthusiastic to do it. So let's hope he does that again and takes that on board, and we get a second season. Because I think Moon Knight, for sure, he fans call out for it.
I don't know if we want to save something like this for later, if we want to speculate on where we might see him next, but I just saw a pretty interesting detail about it's not related to a season 2, but it's related to where he might go. I figured if that might be something we'll talk about collectively later. Yeah.
Let's put a pin on that, because I want to do where we all think it's going to go from here, which is very exciting as well. Look, might as well. It's a good time now. I might just dip into some listener feedback as well, just see what everyone else thought. And look, we know there've been differing thoughts on the show. Some people would want a bit more Moon Knight, a bit more of the representation how he is in the comics, the street level, for sure. So we're going to have a pretty good variety of comments here. Okay, I'm going to pick one for episode 5, and I'll try not to look. I'm trying not to spend too much time here. Angela, Shush, and Angela says Oscar Isaac's acting. Wow, he should get an Emmy. I was bummed the story didn't move further along, but I was glad we got some backstory. I thought for sure that it was because they didn't know about Jake, why the scales weren't balancing, but which is a good point as well. I mean, that could probably explain the lack of Jake. How much can they pack in the final episode? Hopefully it's longer. Well, we know now it isn't, and I hope they don't show Jake just as a post-credit scene. Well, we got that too. Anyway, Angela, I'm hoping you enjoyed it still. The final episode. I mean, guys, in episode 5 still, I mean, we're talking about Oscar's acting. What did you guys think of, I guess, the retconning of Randall, so to speak, and that whole story, and that being basically the trauma? And what are your thoughts on Wendy, not Elias, being the abusive parent? So, yeah, Daniel. Sorry.
Drew? Go ahead.
Just from the opening credits where we're seeing the flash of her screaming it's all your fault. Mm-hmm. You get that feeling of impending doom, but then seeing how she reacts, it felt so real. You really felt like you were taken out of this grandiose cosmic comic book universe, and you were plucked in someone's actual life.
She did really
Because-
well. The actor, she was really good.
Oh, she did a phenomenal job. Like,
Real's
just
the right
again,
way to put it too. It didn't feel like you were watching a drama. It felt like you were being made privy to somebody's personal family, like
you're the
hardships.
friend sitting on the couch at your friend's house.
Yeah, when their
Oh,
parents
true.
are going through a divorce or something. Like
Yeah. And just like, and again, seeing Mark's father, who again, from what we can assume, he is a rabbi in this, as he was in the comics. Just again, like the fact that he just didn't really do anything. Like it was just this, like it would have been because, like, you know, it could have been from two places. Like either he didn't know how to handle it, because, you know, this would have been like, because if you're going with Oscar being like in his like 40s or so, this would have been back in like the mid 80s, like before they really knew how to like deal with like mental trauma like that.
Yeah.
Or from the fact that, you know, again, he's a rabbi. He can't like have his wife committed, because that would look bad for him and for the whole community, the Jewish community that he serves.
Well, and this kind of plays into your point earlier, like things they set up that they can explore way more deeply later on. I think if we get a season 2, getting more of a look back at his relationship with his mother and his father through that whole thing, I think would be something they could absolutely dive more into in future stuff.
Right.
We got enough of the gist of it to get why it's important and why it worked the way it did, but also it left it up to like, it would be interesting to see more of Mark and his father's relationship and why it deteriorated.
Yeah, great.
Definitely. And just in the whole thing with Randall, because like it always seemed like throughout the different runs of Moon Knight, they really didn't know what to do with Randall. First, he was a serial killer. Then it's like, oh no, I'm a master manipulator, and I had a guy get plastic surgery to look like me, so you thought I was a serial killer. I'm actually trying to replace you as Moon Knight. And then, oh no, it turns out I somehow have mutant powers and I accidentally hurt somebody. Now I'm going to try and replace you as Shadow Knight. It really didn't seem like they didn't know what to do with Randall. I almost hate to say it, but like I think he actually serves a better purpose being dead. You know, like
honestly,
like,
I think so too. It was really well done, because if they just wouldn't have had him in there at all, people would have complained about that too. So, what's a better way to solve that than just kill him off and make him a plot point?
Yeah,
I think it was a necessary plot point, frankly. I mean, the whole one of the big points of the show is they were treating DID properly, and all the research I've seen and a lot of the commentary I've seen basically says DID happens in childhood. So in order for Mark to have DID, it couldn't be because of what happened in Khonshu's tomb. It had to be something that happened in the past.
Yeah, and
your kid brother dying and your mother blaming you for it definitely says something as a believable trauma that could trigger DID, as opposed to what the comics did. And I'm not going to bring that up.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Making it his mother instead of his father.
Yeah.
I think that works because his relationship with his father can be played into later on. And the fact of the matter is, his mother is a non-entity in the comics. She's appeared
pretty much. She just kind of was there in the background going.
She's appeared on panel twice in 40 years.
Yeah.
Once in Shadowland Moon Knight #1, where she has a one-panel appearance.
Yeah.
Cooking dinner.
Yes.
And 2 in the Lumiere run, issue 11, where she has actual dialogue.
And she gets embarrassed at him for having a DID slip in their kitchen, which is like, I like that. We talked about this, Ray. I think like I don't like it, but it was interesting seeing them go the route of the abusive mother instead of the just focusing on an abusive father or neglected father, because it's a very real traumatic thing, and I've had personal friends that have dealt with with that, and it's not something that's touched on very much, especially not in a way that is realistic and like heartfelt. And I thought they did it very well, and I think the way that they changed things just a little bit on all the points of his family, I think it worked very well for this rendition of Moon Knight in a way that him finding out that his uncle's murdering people in a basement, like maybe wouldn't have really worked.
No. Oh, look, I think also as well, just the fact that unfortunately, we've had a lot of like abusive or terrible fathers in the MCU, actually, let alone in the comics. You're looking at Thanos, Howard Stark, Ego, the Living Planet. All the dads seem to be real dickheads. So I think it was good to just change it up a bit, even it being as simple as that. But also to the fact that I don't know about you guys, maybe I'm a mother's boy or something, but like I think the connection between a mother and son is a different dynamic to a father and son.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
And so you especially get that with Stephen. Like he's talking to his mum. He's obviously got a close relationship with her. So then when Harrow tries to dial up her number and Stevens realizes that she's dead. I mean, that was one of the most powerful, I think, scenes for me. And it was so sad for Stephen because he had this lovely relationship with this fictitious mum. And then to have your mum in real life be so abusive, and Chris, CMK7 mentions as well, prolonged trauma. So I think, Chris, that was the repeated beatings that he got from his mum.
He probably, because thinking about it, like this probably happened when he was about like 7 or 8.
Yeah, prime time,
think about it. He had to deal with almost a decade of abuse.
Yeah.
No wonder the poor kid developed DID.
Well, and like Mark's whole part of it's the pacifism thing in the comics, but like ultimately it comes down to Mark's distaste for his father, other than sending him away to Putnam, is his inaction and him being hands off and a soft person. And I think showing that he had a broken and abusive mother for at least a decade, like Daniel pointed out, and he, like you said when you guys went over it, right? Like his last thing he said to his dad is like, "Why haven't you done anything about this yet?" They didn't have to spell out that he just spent 10 years getting bullied by his own parent and continuously getting deeper and deeper into mental illness, and his dad just didn't do anything to help other than give him some birthday cakes. And it was nice that they showed that he was like there for him and that he clearly loved Mark. But it was a really effective way of getting Mark to hate his dad for inactivity. Without any of like the fighting and the violence being the pull to it.
And I think the repetitiveness of the celebrating the birthday for me showed how the lack of an effort, I guess, of his dad in a way. Like he might be trying, but all he could think of is to try and, cheer him up during his birthday. He didn't really think beyond that, which again is probably disappointing for Mark or Stephen, that he didn't actually take more of an initiative. There are so many conflicting things. Like it's very sweet of him to do that, but it's just not enough in this situation.
Inaction is still hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
sometimes more so. Like,
sorry,
especially
Mario?
over the course of a decade. Like that's, I would be quite pissed off as well.
Yeah. And then it's so interesting because when we first are introduced to the mom, like he seems so happy, so nice. So it gives you this feeling like there's a history of mental illness, at least on his mother's side of the family.
Mm-hmm.
Like because again, before this trauma, happy, well-meaning mother, barbecuing for the two boys. As soon as a major loss, and losing a son would definitely be a major loss, just frazzles her.
Oh yeah, she spiraled big time. And it's Chris, for sure. Birthdays in the theme of denial, absolutely. Sorry, Mario, you were about to say something?
Oh, I was just saying that Elias's actions are almost performative. It's sort of like when people offer their thoughts and prayers, but don't actually do anything.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
He was,
oh my God, he beat Twitter to the punch.
For sure. So there's, I mean, a lot of stuff there. What did you guys think of another point that did come up, I guess, during the conversations with Loonies, was this fact that it seems like we see the origin of Stephen, right? Tomb Buster, Dr. Stephen Grant. We see the young Mark in his room, and then we see him change to Stephen. And then his mum comes in, and then she says, I don't want to have to do this again. So again, implying that she's done this many times. She takes the belt out, and the door's closed. Now, a lot of people were saying, well, how is Mark using Stephen as as protection, because Stephen is actually the one privy to that particular beating. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I was always
Chad?
wondering about that too, because Stephen gets pissed off that he was his punching bag, he refers to it as, but also like Mark words things in such a way where Stephen was made so he didn't have to remember any of that. And that the way he worded that, it made me confused. Is like, so is Stephen taking the beatings, or is Mark taking the beatings and Stephen's just completely unaware of what's happening? And then I started talking with somebody about how maybe Jake became a third alter as a result of the beatings, and he is so violent because he's the protector after dealing with years and years of that. So maybe that's why Mark is super unaware of him, because he came out of Stephen. There's all sorts of weirdness there, but I was confused by that as well, because Stephen is such a sweetheart for someone who took 10 years of physical abuse. I don't think that really works.
That Stephen doesn't remember any of it, though, tells me that he didn't experience it.
Yeah, that's a confusing thing, because you see him change though, just as his mum comes in.
But the thing is, and this is rather critical, we don't actually see the beating.
Yeah, that's true.
We don't see Mark or Stephen being beaten. Theoretically, particularly if this wasn't the first time, and it's kind of unclear from context, theoretically, that could be where Jake showed up.
Yep. That's what
CMK7 said in the comments. That's his theory as well.
It's a viable theory, and it certainly explains a lot of things. Like perhaps Stephen doesn't remember any of it,
to the point where he only remembers loving his mother to death.
Mild physical abuse. Jake remembers the worst of it, and it turned Jake into who he is. The part that confuses people, I think, is that they're thinking of Stephen as an interject, that he's playing the action hero. When Stephen Grant is near, he has no fear. I forget what the exact line is.
Yep.
That doesn't seem to be the case. If anything else, it's almost like Stephen Grant, the Stephen Grant alter, is an escape valve. Push him away from reality, so that he's not experiencing it. But the way they play it, having him look at the poster and then turn to Stephen, doesn't really fit with the Stephen that we know. It's almost like that Stephen turned into Jake, and then another Stephen showed up later, which doesn't really work very well.
No.
I'd love to see the script for that scene, basically.
Sorry, you love the what?
I'd love to see the script for that scene.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
That was one bit that I don't think worked very well. We knew Stephen for 4 episodes already, and he was a really nice guy, kind of a goofball. No way was he an action hero. No,
I mean, you see the young Mark when he does change. He's got all the mannerisms of Oscar Isaac playing Stephen. He's all, I've got to clean my room, and he's got that English accent as well, and he's doing all that. So, I don't know. Yeah, it's a bit blurry, that thing. I totally agree with you as well, because I just took the Toonbuster poster, like literally maybe just grabbed the name and maybe the accent of Stephen from that poster, and not the personality of Dr. Stephen Grant in Toonbuster. But I mean, it's all speculation, really. We don't know.
Can you give credit to that kid for pulling off the alter switch?
Yeah.
Oscar is a mature actor. That kid did a pretty damn good job all by himself.
He did a good job. Yeah, he was good.
He must have gotten a lot of pointers from Oscar, like on set, or that kid was super observant, because man, he had that nailed down to a T.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I mean, I'm just trying to go through my head as we go through episode 5. There's there's also as well. I like the little bit where Mark and Stephen come across in the psych ward in his mindscape, all of Mark's kills, basically all of his targets, and they turn up later in the duet. But there's an obvious regret that Mark has. You know, he mentioned something about I'm kind of half wishing that one of them would have off me during this thing, so I don't have to do this anymore. So he doesn't like, and this is obvious, but he doesn't like to do what Khonshu has got him to do. He's kind of bound into this agreement. He does it well, but yeah, I don't know. So seeing also the origin, which was very comic accurate, of Mark the Merc.
The temple looks so cool.
Oh, so good.
And
I wonder if that was that ripped from Lemires, right? I asked Rebecca.
It's really close to it, yeah.
Yeah.
Looks
very
pretty
cool.
accurate, yeah.
The shot of him the shot of him in the temple as he's crawling towards it, that was almost straight from the comic.
Oh, nice.
The one big difference, which was remarked upon, I think, in the Facebook group, is that in the comic he doesn't try to commit suicide.
Yeah, that was another big thing there. So what did you guys think of that creative license?
I mean, it wasn't necessary, but I didn't mind it, and I think it kind of hammered home just how tired Mark was of dealing with all the nonsense that his life had been full of up to that point.
Yeah, I think it was more of a survival tactic, because he was like, either I sit here and bleed to death suffering until something comes and picks my guts out of me, or I just end it right now with no pain, no suffering. That's kind of like the hint I got from it, because he was like super messed up by Bushman, which I love the fact that they made it in the show that Bushman was his old CO.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting detail.
That is, true.
That could be a cool thing to explore later on if they do a season 2, because then Bushman would not just be a random warlord mercenary that he runs into out dicking around. Have history with him. Then we'll get a look at his days in the Marines, his days working under Bushman in the Marines, and then what led to them being globe-trotting criminals.
Well,
I think that's a really cool
CO in the Marines, or was he CO as a Mark?
I guess I don't necessarily know what a CO means. I assume that was a military.
That's a military. Sorry, Chad, was that commanding officer? Yeah,
commanding officer. Okay, yeah. I just assumed that it meant that he worked under him in the military, and now he's doing jobs with him.
That's what I assumed. Yeah, because the Merc stuff is all kind of off the books, right? Like it's you don't have ranks.
Like they would have loose terms like that, but he specifically called him his old CO. So
meaning he doesn't have the title anymore, but he's his partner now.
Yeah.
That'd be actually, I never really thought how cool that would be to explore further. That could be,
that would be cool.
A whole series in and of itself.
Yeah, like if they picked up from like in Vengeance of the Moon Knight, when they brought Bushman back from the dead, there's that scene where like Mark's sitting there with Frenchie and Ray, and they're all drinking, laughing, talking about the good old days. Like, oh yeah, remember when he showed up with wearing a Magnum PI shirt with a truck full of rocket launchers and saved all of our asses? And they're like, oh yeah, who? And they're like, Bushman.
Yeah.
Just like you got that sense that like him and Frenchie and Mark, they really were like these three amigos until Bushman decided to just completely throw it out the window because he got too greedy.
Bit greedy, yeah. As Mark says as well. I love it how they've mentioned Bushman, so he's really out there. Like they alluded to him in the lead up to these last 2 episodes, but now we've got a name to the guy, so that's great. It was fun
watching the show with people who had no idea about any of the comic details, and like me being one of 6 people in the room who hears the word Bushman and gets all jazzed. Like, what's a Bushman?
Yeah, what's that, dude? CMK7 Chris also says, I thought it made perfect sense putting the gun to his head. It's already racked with guilt. He's already racked with guilt, and now he feels responsible for the deaths of more innocents. For sure. I mean, I guess he was party in some ways. He's with Bushman, so he
at the very least, he can stop him.
Yeah, that's right. He tried to, but I saw that as well. He was mortally wounded. And look, I think like you, Drew. I think he didn't need to, but they put it in there. They put the gun over there. That was the last resort. Just to kind of highlight that Khonshu was basically swooping in just when he was at his absolute lowest.
Like a drug addict being found in the alleyway. Khonshu could see the potential that Mark or even Steven or Jake could offer him, and he's like, ooh, opportunity.
It allowed Khonshu to start their relationship by saying "what a waste," which is just about the most dickheaded thing, and so Khonshu-esque.
Oh yeah,
exactly,
Definitely.
exactly.
I love how spot on he was in this, because
was great.
Great. Yeah,
there were moments, like especially during his fight with Aminet, where he's like, oh, I am offering a choice, which is what you're trying to take away. So like you can see he's trying to be good and righteous, but
his
like
moral ambiguity was done very well. And
also
like, I got kind of worried that they were gonna. They've been good about this for the most part, but I got worried that with how Khonshu is, they were gonna maybe try to Disney him up a bit. And like, he was funny on occasion for sure, but at no point, no point were you made to like him. No. And I think that's why he works really well in the comics. Is like, he can be very endearing, and he is a really cool god of the moon with the bird skull, but he is a total asshole.
He's a total. The only time I really liked him was that fight scene with Amit. Like, he decides to throw down.
Sick. The way he does those little blip.
Yeah, and then
he does is kind of awesome.
Yeah,
he totally ripped off Nightcrawler there.
He does. Yeah.
All that was missing was the little dance sound effect with the blue smoke.
Yeah. But no, Khonshu was great. What do you guys think then? I mean, I guess moving on, we did discuss the Duat and Stephen being petrified, as you said, Mario, and our thoughts leading into it, into Mark going to the Field of Reeds. Bouncing back now to episode 6, what did you guys make of this coming of Amit and Harrow? Actually, we haven't really mentioned too much about him, but I think Ethan Hawke did a really good job in the last episode. Mostly
seeing him make the switch to like being able to
submissive.
Fight and being kind of a badass, and it not feeling weird or awkward.
Yeah. Oh, but I was talking about him being quite submissive towards Ahmed. I think that was.
Oh, I thought that scene was
thing
great.
Where he's like, "Well, I'm ready to die because I know my scales aren't balanced," and Ahmed's like, "No, I think I'm going to keep you around."
Watching that the second time really hit too, because if you pay attention, like his acting is fantastic as he's talking to Amit and realizing that after all these years of his patronage to her, traveling the world, doing all this stuff, building her cult, he still isn't worthy. As he's talking, his eyes just start getting more and more red, and he starts like he's crying because he's realizing that he's done all of this and it didn't really mean anything. And he's also realizing that his God isn't as strict as she says she is. And I almost wonder if he's losing some of his faith. It's interesting to see him still being so on board with following her path, while also hearing her say that she's going to make a caveat for him because she wants him to do the work for her. And I feel like they don't explore it, but I thought that was a really cool dynamic break where he's like, I'm still accepting your judgment and you're not even going to follow through on it. Like maybe he didn't even want to still be her avatar at that point. I don't know. I thought it was really interestingly done.
I loved the fact that he was willing to die.
Yeah.
He was
at no point did he lose faith in what his path was.
He was an absolute believer, 100%.
Yeah, that he was saying, well, I freed you. I don't want a reward.
Yes.
My scales are out of balance. Judge me as you would.
Yep. I'm happy to take.
He's a hypocrite. Which apparently is de rigueur for the Egyptian gods, doesn't change the fact that he was a true believer, that he wasn't a traditional supervillain with an agenda of his own.
No.
His agenda was her agenda. She's the one who betrayed him, not the other way around. And yet, even then, he still fought for her.
Yeah.
That's insanely good writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
To see that your God is fallible and yet you still will follow just shows a deep commitment that goes beyond the manic.
Yeah. Because you would be disappointed. Like, you would be deep inside, Harrow would have been a little bit disappointed at not going the way he thought. But I felt it was more like a resignation. It's like, oh, well, yeah, I'm in too deep now. So he's, but I mean, he still believes in what he believes, but he will follow Amit because despite what she has said, he'll still do it. So
her will, not his.
Sorry, what was that?
Her will, not his.
Her will, yeah, exactly, not his. Big hello to Moonlit Comics as well. Hello, And and Chris saying Harrow has conviction. Yeah, he certainly, as you're saying, Drew, when the fights. Well, actually, I just want to step back with the Rick, the Rick Ball. He did mention he loved the kaiju fight. I love the deities fighting, the War of the Gods. Like, what did you guys think? I thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that was playing out, but that wasn't necessarily visible for everyone. That was kind of like, gods in the sky, whilst, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't think they ever showed any people on the ground looking at them. But the way that it was filmed was awesome. I think one of my favorite shots in the episode actually is after Harrow blasts Mark to the ground, and he looks up, and you see Harrow walking towards Mark, and the camera starts to shift as Amit and Khonshu are like are falling over in the opposite direction. It was such a cool shot.
It was so good.
And like so weird, like so not Moon Knight, but still worked with Moon Knight. Like I thought that was none of us expected when we got a Moon Knight show there'd be a giant kaiju fight at the end.
It was a massive spectacle. Yeah.
I had to ask myself, how can Khonshu be chokeslammed when he doesn't have a neck?
He can't. You can't choke him. Yeah, metaphorical, invisible neck. Yeah, but I mean, Chad. With episode 6. Like, what were your thoughts on the introduction, so to speak, of Amit? Funnily enough, very easy to do. You just got to smash the Ushabti, and they're free. It's a very poor lock, I think. to keep
all the effort that went into like trapping these gods. All you gotta do is like drop it on accident.
Yeah, exactly. What if someone went to Antique Roadshow and they got one and they just dropped it on their, on their kitchen floor? But yeah, what did you think?
With the staging of the kaiju fight, it felt so. It felt like they were directly ripping off the Final Fantasy Kingsglaive movie, because that's the exact finale of that. It's you got two combatants on the ground, and you got these giant like monsters in the background, and they're like riffing off of each other in combat with their own combatants. And it's like, I've seen this. This is a Square Enix production.
Okay, fair enough. But did you enjoy it nevertheless? Or?
Yeah, I loved it. It was amazing.
I think that's where all the money went, like the CGI. There was also another shot of, you guys remember when Khonshu is like looking at the setting sun, and then Stephen, Mark comes up to him and he negotiates that deal. My God, that look of Khonshu with the setting sun, the light, is just brilliant.
Looks awesome.
Brilliantly done.
Well, that is the first time we've seen both Khonshu and Moon Knight in the daytime. So the costume looked that good in sunlight.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's the first time you see them together. Because there has been critical remarks, I guess, on some of the CGI. I mean, I did think some of the effects were a bit off in the earlier episodes, and
there was a little video gamey at some points.
Yeah.
And it's just so weird. It's like they need to give these new characters at least an extra 2 episodes for space for the plot to breathe. And they need to they're Marvel Studios. They're not lacking in funds. They need to just give the same CGI budget they gave Falcon and Winter Soldier to a new character. Because why would you introduce a new character that you need people to stick with and not give them the same budget? Because you're going to lose people on that alone. I mean, I got over it because I was so excited to be watching it. But when you go back and visit, it's very noticeable how much better the CGI is in the later episodes when they needed to lock it in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
because the fight scenes look insanely good in episode 6, and if you go back to episode 2, or like when they impale the jackal, it's cool, but it looks like a cutscene from a Final Fantasy game.
Yeah. You could argue the fact. I was thinking like the car chase in episode 1. You could argue the fact that it was a dream sequence or something. That made it look a little bit weird. I don't know. But yeah, I mean that a minor, I think, quibble. But I guess my point was that it was phenomenal. I think the CGI and especially the last episode.
I gotta say, him flying really threw me off at first, but when I watched it the second time, I didn't care, and I thought it was so cool. Like, I don't want to see him flying all the time, but I think in a situation where Khonshu whips him up and throws him, and I thought it was pretty badass, especially when him and Harrow came flying into Cairo, like linked on each other, and I don't know, it's pretty intense. I think it'd be cool to see that explored more.
I don't think he can fly like Superman. I actually,
yeah.
I rewatched the episodes today, and I paid close attention to that. And in the first scene, he goes up really high, and he glides a straight line. If he could control that flight in anything other than the controlled glide, he would have landed at the top of the pyramid, not halfway down. He never changed altitude other than to go down. He never changed direction.
Yeah.
So my thinking, what basically was, is what you literally said. Is Khonshu threw him up really high, and he glided all the way
He just got it all.
I also really liked that it was about to be Steven thrown in the air, and he's like, Mark, take this.
Yeah,
one.
take this one.
Can you imagine if he thrown Mr. Knight up in the air?
Whirling dust around him, like Khonshu was getting ready to lift him.
Yeah.
Hurry up, idiots!
No, Mark, you take this one.
Yeah, yeah. I like to think it was Khonshu's like a one, maybe a one-off or temporary thing that Khonshu did. Just it's not something that Moon Knight can just produce on a whim. A big hello to Paul.
In the comics without much explanation, he just sort of glides in.
He just glides. Yeah, I mean,
comes from a roof. So this is just that sort of amped up a little bit.
Amped up across. How far did he glide again? It was quite.
We don't know because we don't know where the Tomb of Alexander was. But the world record for a wingsuit is 32 kilometers.
Okay.
So theoretically, he could be flying quite a distance because we don't know how high up he started.
Yeah.
And of course, he didn't have to worry about parachuting to a landing because he has the healing suit, so he could just crash into the side of the Great Pyramid.
Exactly.
So sure hurt.
Must have been hell on his arms.
CMK7. It was definitely gliding on a wind gust, not flying. That was the wrong verbiage.
Oh yeah. I'd like to think he's gliding as well. I mean, there were some shots where he was really horizontal to the ground, just zooming across. So unless there's a lot of wind,
really psyched to like maybe see him end up in New York and just doing that off of a building on his own.
Like they've had awesome shots of. I think Noel mentioned it, of these real Sienkiewicz-like shots of Moon Knight. Like it was that one where he's chasing the werewolf, or the werewolf is chasing him, and he jumps across a rooftop. I mean, pure like Sienkiewicz. I thought it was fantastic. So I'd love to see him in an urban setting. It would be so fun. I guess might as well now. I mean, we can still talk about episodes 5 and 6, of course. But Drew, you mentioned before where you'd like to see, where you think Moon Knight is going, because I'm talking about urban settings now. So it's just kind of popped up. Let's start with you, Drew. Then,
Sure.
then we'll go around. Where do you think the opportunities are?
Midnight Sun's obvious one. We'll see once Blade is established. Everybody's getting so jacked on the Midnight Sun's possibilities, but I don't think we're going to see any movement on that until Blade happens, because that would be the obvious spot for it to start. I really am hoping for that. I know he isn't necessarily integral to the Midnight Suns, but as we've discussed several times, I love Damnation, and even though his depiction in that was terrible, seeing him in live action Midnight Suns would be incredible. I think he could. It's been fun watching a lot of the showrunners and producers getting asked this question, because like they all have so much fun speculating where they'd like to see him, and how you don't necessarily think of Moon Knight as being a team player or someone that could work very well outside of being by himself, but he is actually really fun to watch around other people. And like I got really jacked watching him and Layla run into that fight together. They worked really well as a duo. I know in the Discord I linked that Reddit video where somebody took the Civil War
yes, I saw that.
They edited in Moon Knight on top of where Spider-Man usually is. And
Mr. Knight and Moon Knight.
Watching the editing of him quipping with the Avengers during a Civil War fight and switching back and forth between suits, even though it was just a for fun video, it like got me really excited at the possibility of seeing him interact with other characters, especially now that we know how rough and tough this version of Mark is and how goofy this version of Steven is. That with other heroes in the MCU would be a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, I think he could have a really solid season 2 where Mark and Steven are learning to live their lives together. And clearly at the end of the season, there's still sand around the bed. They're still worried about waking up in the middle of the night. They're still not addressing Jake, who's very clearly there. They could start working that in. And I think it would be cool to start seeing, Frenchie show up, or getting a look back at his time as a Marine or something like that. So I would like to see a season 2. I know Diab has come out and said that he would love to just make a movie.
Okay.
I think he would really nail if he could just have 2 hours to flesh out instead of a series. I think that would be really good. So there's a lot that I'd like to see him do, and a lot that I think he'd be capable of. The one thing I wanted to point out is my buddy sent me this earlier, and I thought it was really interesting. I don't know who the user is, but on Reddit, somebody was doing a recap of all these Marvel Phase 4 insider leaks, or whatever you want to call them, from a guy who's been pretty spot on accurate with a lot of his things that he's posted. And apparently he came out, we'll see if this is even remotely true, but he said the main crew for Captain America 4 will obviously be Sam, Bucky, and Joaquin Torres as I can't remember who he becomes. He becomes Falcon.
Falcon.
New Falcon.
Apparently, he has Moon Knight listed in here as being involved in the cast of Captain America 4.
Oh,
how that will work, I don't know, but I think that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, well, interesting there.
It's a bunch of military people. Maybe they'd have, Joaquin's Falcon character. Maybe he worked alongside Bushman and Mark when they were in the Marines together. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. Mario, any ideas as to where we may see?
Well, everyone seems to think Midnight Suns, but when you break it down, Moon Knight really isn't a mystical character. He has mystical powers, yeah, but he's not really. Actually, Chris, you just stole my thunder.
Oh,
you don't get a second season where they address Jake and maybe bring in Bushman. I'd like to see Secret Avengers.
Yeah, I think that'd be cool.
Because we do have a situation where Mark is somewhat of a street level character. I mean, his powers, for the most part, the possible exception of flight, which we've already discussed, are basically, run in, beat on people until they stop doing what you don't want them to do anymore.
Yeah.
And the very fact that Mr. Knight technically showed up in Secret Avengers 19, I forget which volume. I think volume 1.
I think it was volume 1, yeah.
And that kind of ties into what you just rumored, Drew, which is
that was going to be my question. So I never read Secret Avengers, but Cap organized the Secret Avengers, didn't he?
He would, yes.
So that would be an interesting thing for that'd be a really interesting thing for this version of Captain America to get involved in, is organizing a Secret Avengers. Never even thought of that.
Maybe there'll be a situation where they don't want to be, the big flashy heroes, but they need to do something low key, kind of under the radar.
And with how adamant Sam was about fixing world government issues, I could see him getting on board with doing something like that. That's a little more covert.
Bucky as the Winter Soldier, White Wolf, or whatever he goes by nowadays, also somewhat of a Black Ops character.
Yep.
Man, you guys just got me all jacked. I didn't even think about that.
Joaquin Torres is, I'm not actually that familiar with the comic book character, but Bucky's ex-military. Sam is ex-military, Air Force, not Army. Moon Knight is ex-military. For all we know, Bushman could be the villain. I'm not saying he is. I'm not even going to make that claim because, frankly, Sam has plenty of villains of his own to play with. But he could easily be a, cheap flunky or a dragon, as TV tropes like to put it. So you could get, I could see Mark fitting in there, either in a movie with his own issues as a subplot, or in another series of Secret Avengers and so forth. Because there's also a subplot that hasn't been played with yet, which is Contessa Valentina de la Fontaine. All over the place.
I would love nothing more than to watch Steven interact with my queen Elaine. That would be so fun.
That would be cool.
And she's also comes from a Black Ops background, so I could see that working.
That could, absolutely.
There's so many moving parts in the MCU now that I forget about some of these characters. I don't pay that much. I pay attention to all of them, but I'm more on board with the weirdo characters, so I kind of forget what what the political, more political affiliated ones are out doing.
It's so diverse, the universe now, which is so great. I mean, you got corners, you got the cosmic as well. Chad, what do you think? We've got Secret Avengers, we've got Midnight Suns. Where do you think maybe Moon Knight will pop up next?
Well, I mean, so I rewatched episode 6 and the post-credit, obviously the whole Jake thing. I looked at the skyline when he was exiting the mental facility, and it's London again. So he's still operating within the same bounds as, Mark and Steven living in the flat. And then I'm not sure when we're supposed to be coming out, even if it is part of the proper MCU. But I mean, right now, what else is going on in London? I mean, it's
Dane Whitman. That's all.
Exactly, and Blade.
So as well.
Yeah, it really makes sense for them all to come across each other, especially if we are to believe that where Steven and Mark wake up at the end of the episode is reality, and they are still living in London. Then, Blade being based in London, Dane Whitman still being in London, clearly showing up in the Blade movie, it would stand to reason that they're going to run into him too. And I think that's pretty interesting to have them all meeting up in the UK, and I'm pretty happy. It's weird for Moon Knight, but it's cool that they're keeping those characters centralized to where they're from, and I think maybe that's why they had him stationed in the UK to begin with. Maybe how Feige plans these things out so far in advance. It wouldn't surprise me that that's why they had him working in a British museum.
Yeah. How about Daniel? How about you? What do you reckon?
Oh, I have so many thoughts. Like you guys were saying earlier, again, Midnight Suns. Because I really feel like Blade is going to kind of be like the new Nick Fury. Like, he's going to be the one showing up at, like, the end credit scenes.
Okay.
And, like, I've got a mission for you because you thought Thanos was bad. Wait until you meet so-and-so. And it could be, like, a huge supernatural threat. Like, it could be Lilith.
It could be Dracula.
I mean, he does owe Moon Knight money.
Apparently, they tried to get that line in the TV show somewhere. They just couldn't pull it off.
Oh, really? Yeah. Look, I think also don't discount. We've got Werewolf by Night coming up. I think
that's like the most obvious one and keeps getting glossed over. But it would be a real shame if he didn't pop up in there at all.
Because the lead actor, he's a Spanish actor. I don't know where it's going to be set, but it could be in Europe again. So again, it could be right for Mark, Steve, who's in UK to bounce wherever it is. Also, Secret Invasion. It might. I mean, I know they've wrapped, so maybe not because it just seems too close. But I think you might get the who's who in that TV show. I mean, if it's anything like the comics, then we will be getting some surprise like appearances of people. I still think Sharon Carter's a Skrull. I don't know about you guys, just with her power broking thing. But
I really want her to be a Skrull.
That would be something.
Yeah.
Like, but the whole Secret Invasion thing really blows my mind. I really hope we get to see like characters like Moon Knight, like Blade, like the Black Knight.
Yep.
Like, there's something going on where they couldn't be like replaced or something like that. Like, they're the only ones that could not be Skrulls. Like Mark, because of his DID. I mean, what Skrull is going to be able to even try and tackle that?
That's a really good point. How does a Skrull replicate multiple personalities? It'd be kind of it wouldn't be funny. It'd be very offensive. But like to watch a Skrull try to take Mark's personality and then try to like fake having a second accent, it just looks like bad acting.
Yeah.
It probably wouldn't fly.
And again, I think that would kind of really be cool to play, because another thing with like Secret Avengers, because if you remember, when we're first introduced to Sam in Winter Soldier, when he was Falcon, that was still kind of like a Black Ops thing. Like, they didn't like go around announcing that Sam had these wings. Like, him and his partner had these like mechanical wings they used for these like missions and stuff. So that could definitely play into like a sort of Black Ops sort of feel for it. So I think Sam would have that kind of background. Plus, you never know. They could get Chris Evans to come back and put on the old man makeup, and like he leaves like these recordings for Sammy, and like, Sam, I was watching stuff throughout this new history that's been made. There are certain things that need to be corrected, and by the time I get caught up, I'm going to be too old.
Daniel, you got me all excited over here. That's
so
such a
you're gonna
cool
have
idea.
Like
Such a cool idea.
Video diaries from like Steve Rogers, where he's like gonna put one. He's like, Sam, there's this Latvian dictator that's gonna come to power by the time you pick up the shield.
Yeah,
you need to make sure he doesn't get too big, and make sure his economy isn't. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. After Multiverse of Madness, me and my buddy that read Secret Wars together were getting all excited about Secret Wars related stuff, and I brought up like, man, it's a real shame that we're not going to get to see angry old man Captain get super pissed off about the Illuminati. But that would be a way for old man Cap to come back, as if he was leaving notes for Sam to follow and to form the Secret Avengers. And I think that if that's not in MCU now, I'm going to be very upset. I mean, it doesn't need to be, but that's a really cool idea, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks.
Is there a sorry, Daniel?
I gotta hop off, guys, but it's been really nice.
No, good to catch up, Daniel. We'll wrap up soon anyway, but no, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Mr. Knight, as well.
I'll make sure to tell them you guys all said bye. You guys have a good one.
You too, man.
Catch up. See ya.
There is one question that the mid-credit scene kind of brought up that we haven't addressed, and maybe we can fit it in.
Yep.
Well, it's actually two questions kind of related. One is the casual one, which is, where did Jake get the money for the limousine? I mean, we know that Mark's fairly wealthy, but at the end of the TV show, assuming everything is real the way you expect it to be, they're living in a flat. We don't have a Stephen Grant mansion, so we shouldn't have a Stephen Grant limo. And the second question, which I think is the really fun one to think about, is how long has Jake been working for Khonshu? Did he start working for Khonshu after this episode? When he let Stephen and Mark go, or has he been working for Khonshu all this time?
Yeah, I'm assuming it's the latter, because I mean, again, that's just my assumption. Only because Khonshu mentions because he alluded to that he wanted to find another avatar, and we all thought it was Layla, but I think he said something like whoever said it was going to be like Layla. So I
said,
think maybe he jumped.
Why would I ever need someone else when Mark has no idea how truly troubled he really is?
Which puts enough doubt in it for me not to answer that question.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think I could see Jake having been going at it for a while, and I could see Jake and Khonshu having been smart enough to reroute Mark's Merc funds somewhere that he could use them in private.
Well, he still uses the name because the license plate is SPKTR.
Yeah.
Which
was like a sloppy Easter egg, but I was too excited to care.
Yeah, he wanted Mark to take the heat for anything.
Well, my guess is because you have a passport. Jake Lawson may have an identity, but he doesn't necessarily have paperwork.
Yes.
So he's probably using Mark's name.
Yeah, true. He can pass off his... Yes.
Like for getting more money and all that jazz. If they have rerouted a bunch of Mark's cash from being a merc, I mean, with Secret Invasion coming up, maybe it's dataless genetic sequencing like in the comics.
Hey?
I don't remember that, so I'll take your word for it.
I forgot what part of which run, but that's where he gets like the second big windfall of his cash. He goes absolutely broke, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, you made all these investments in the genetic sequencing, and that was right before Secret Invasion came out.
Interesting.
I forgot about that. He mentions that,
yeah.
The earliest I remember is 2014, where he basically says, this is money from all of the criminals that I defeated.
Or he could have been running like, you know, it could have been as basic as him selling relics or something like that from their globetrotting behind Mark and Steven's back. But I like that theory too, because I do remember him saying that, and I didn't read the Secret Invasion run myself, but it's interesting to know that may have factored into that in the comics.
Look, I think it's also, you guys are missing the blatantly obvious, the Occam's razor, that like, you know, a whole bunch of high school girls, you know, Jake's just gone and hired the limo just for the day. So,
it just happened to say Spectre on it.
Yeah,
he's like, I like that one.
Mario, you've got a fan here. John,
he's an old friend.
Totally aghast that mate doesn't remember something. Mario, shame on you. So very good, some good questions there, Mario. I don't know. We'll have to see. It seems, again, Sarah Goha, I'm sorry if I mispronounce her name, one of the producers, was an article saying that they're definitely, you know, they're looking towards a season 2. It's the way they've fashioned it. Although taking nothing away from what you said, Drew, as well, I think it's beautifully done as a entire piece unto itself. You know, the season, you could walk away and that could still be, you know, not enough. There can still be enough there to close it out without being too many loose ends. You know, if you
and I'm sure they did that on purpose. I just can't. I can't see Disney and Marvel having put so much work into a character to not do more with them.
Yeah,
it would be a first for them for sure.
I really think it's the Emmy thing. They're trying to get
for sure.
Emmy, so
I think the Emmy.
They're playing. Oh no, we don't have plans.
And Diop said in an interview recently too, like a post-season interview, how much he wants to explore Jake and how like all these ideas he has for continuing that. So if we don't get it, it won't be for lack of the creative team wanting to or having ideas.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like reception for the show has overall kind of been good. So that's a good sign that we will get more, which is good. Look, guys, we haven't actually touched, so apologies, haven't touched too much on the listener feedback. Sorry, Loonies. Just to round it off, unless, guys, have you got any other particular topics or points of episodes 5 or 6 that you think we may not have covered?
I kind of want to talk about the first generation of Steven. So I kind of got caught up on the idea that, you know, you guys were talking about Steven being like the ideal, like that Mark was trying to like save a piece of himself to make him more pure. You're like, well, he doesn't deserve to get beat on, and then created Steven. Well, and then you said, then Steven might have created Jake. It's weird to think about that because I agree with Wendy Spector. I think that Mark has been extremely jealous of Roro the entire childhood. And as young as Mark was, I don't see how, I don't know, he could embody that kind of noble, like, idealism that, like, all of a sudden he has to separate a piece of his head into this, like, separate being. I would think that he would try and stash himself somewhere else. So I would completely understand all of a sudden, like, you try and make Steven, well, then Steven creates someone else to get away from it.
Yeah.
I just don't see the mentality working out that
For a
Mark...
while, I was thinking that Steven was an idealized version of his brother. I'm not sure I buy that because of some other details, but that might play into it as well. If he was jealous of his brother, maybe he tried to become his brother.
Yeah. I mean, they both loved Tomb Buster, you know. So in that sense, I don't know where I'm going with that, but like, yeah, for sure. Interesting, Chad. I don't know.
The only other point I could think to touch on, and this is odd for me because I'm usually so positive about all this stuff, but I did want to discuss one pointy end, as you guys were referring to him as.
Yeah, sure.
Is just the Ennead, which was a bummer because Diop did such a fantastic job with the Egyptian lore and representation and everything. I think ultimately this just came down to the restriction of the 6-episode time, but I wanted the Ennead to be so much cooler than they were. They were just so dumb when they had that chamber judgment scene,
Oh yeah, yeah.
which a lot of people have commented on. And then rewatching episode 6 today, like Harold wipes the floor with all of them.
Yeah.
And after watching Moon Knight have this borderline invincible suit for 6 episodes, why doesn't like Osiris's Avatar have a cool suit?
Too
Seeing
passive,
that
maybe?
wall of that wall of Ushaptis, never got an explanation as to why all those guys were locked up or why none of them were set free.
Another loose
And they
end.
did a lot of really interesting tiny details that I really appreciated, like when Taweret is explaining the Dua and the balancing of the heart to Mark and Steven in the psych ward. She's reading off notes, and that's because it's not her job. It's Anubis's job, but Anubis is locked up. That was a really interesting detail to see her frantically skipping through notes, not knowing that she's like, sorry, like that's clearly not her usual job. Yeah, it was an awesome touch, but then to just never find out why Anubis is locked up in an Ushapti, it was a lot of like really cool setup. That was like the only part of the show that I ultimately ended up not liking is like the lack of like depth to the Ennead. And ultimately, it's just a lack of time in the show, I think. But that would have been something that would have been greatly benefited by more time to explore.
Yeah, I think a missed opportunity.
I always have a story about why the avatars went down so easily. And it all boils down to the fact that Harrow didn't defeat the gods. He judged the avatars.
Yeah.
The approach he used is the exact same thing he used for, judging people. And
so there wasn't like a big fight, a god fight in there. It was the avatars getting judged, and the human bodies were toast.
Except for the Osiris avatar, because Osiris is probably is god of the day. He probably has some resistance to that. But we didn't actually, with the exception of Khonshu and Taweret and Ammit, we didn't actually see the gods themselves. No. So they're still kind of open to interpretation, unless they show up in Thor, which we may or may not see.
Joel Lewis had a good comment here. He said the thing about the other Ennead is their avatars are not necessarily physical avatars the way Khonshu makes his. They're not fists of their gods. That makes sense. Those people they spoke for their gods, but they weren't necessarily getting outfitted to go to war for
they're
their
not.
gods.
Yeah, they're not warriors. I think even I think even Osiris says, or one of them might have been Horus says, "Oh, you're garish, Khonshu with your garish weapons and armor."
That's true.
And all that.
He talks shit on the way his avatar looks and acts.
Yeah.
Okay, so never mind that. I mean, it's still Ennead could have used the whole episode to explore in themselves.
But no, I agree. I think
I like bringing that up because I wanted to hear those types of points to that makes it a little more understandable and makes more sense to me.
But I mean, I agree. I think there's a missed opportunity there. I mean, because it was also outlined as the War of the Gods. We did see Ammit and Khonshu at the end, but I assumed it was going to be a lot more than that. But again, just constraints of the time in the TV show and what we...
CMK7 had a good point here, too. He said that the other gods just didn't necessarily give a shit what was going on Earth. True. They openly say that they don't want to interrupt with what's going on Earth. Well, that is exactly what Ammit and Khonshu want to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're the proactive ones.
That's why I bring these things up. Pointy and less pointy.
I mean, it could still be pointy, but that's, in the scheme of things, it's all good. Anything else, guys, before we wrap up? I'm just mindful of the time as well. I know, Mario, Chad, are you any other points that you want to raise?
Not offhand. Maybe on the topic of the Ennead, how Bast is missing, probably because Bast wanted to get in on stuff on Earth. It's like, we're not going to screw with you too much because she's been gone for so long. So probably just shoot her off to her part of Africa and just kind of let that go.
I think I saw some YouTube guy talking, and this is just speculation, but he was saying that the reason Bast wasn't shown or wasn't around is, I guess, in the Black Panther comic lore, Bast arrived on Earth with the and I could be butchering this, but it was that she arrived on Earth with the vibranium meteor that landed in Wakanda, and she stayed there, and so she only exists in Wakanda and in the ancestral plane. So they clearly have stated that the Ennead exists in the Overvoid, which is a different area entirely. So Bast doesn't necessarily coincide with the Ennead.
Oh,
so she swanned off to do her own thing.
Yeah, that's gone rogue, gone maverick. No, that's fair enough. I would love to see. Again, we'll have Wakanda forever. This year,
That'd be a really cool spot for him to pop up. I don't know if he could, but it would be interesting.
Maybe a mention at least. You know,
running around in a white hood.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe not. Be a bad look in Wakanda.
Yep. Well, guys, I think that about wraps it. Sorry, we are short on time now. Loonies, thank you so much for all your feedback as well. Sorry we didn't get to much of it, but I'm glad that the discussion is being held in the discussion threads. I mean, people were responding to each other and stuff, just getting the discussion going. So thank you so much for interacting in the group and sharing your thoughts as well. A big thank you to you guys as well, in absentia, Daniel doing, but to Mario Digicom, to the Power of Chad, and to Turntables. A huge thank you, guys. It's always fun to chat with you. You must be absolutely gassed, Drew. I don't know.
I'm more energized now than I was at the beginning because you guys got me all amped up.
Oh, and also a big thank you to our live stream commentators as well. A big thanks to Chris CMK7 and Joel, Moonlit Comics. We saw Paul in there as well. He's been on the panel, and Mario's mate here, I think John. How do you pronounce that name, Mario? Daedalus? Daedalus, yeah, Daedalus Gavoni. But thank you so much for interacting with us while we're, talking about something that we love to talk about. Guys, do you want to plug anything? I mean, before we head off, I'd like to offer that at least.
I mean, it's not my thing, but we got Black, White, and Blood this Wednesday, don't we?
Oh, yes.
Yep.
May 11. Go check it out. Rebecca.
I've had an absolute blast with the show, as I expected to. Huge MCU nerd, but I'm excited to get back to having regular comic releases. Yeah. I feel like I haven't read a new Moon Knight comic in weeks. I haven't. So
yeah,
and we might as well plug Jed's run as well.
Yes.
When you start on Moon Knight, the first issue of this current run is a great jumping on point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Look, we've been caught up with the TV show, and I think that's fair enough. I mean, this has been such a wild, dream of a ride for us. I was just making the most of it, hence the 2 episodes per.
Well, I gotta really
TV
applaud
show.
you for that, Ray. Like you and Rebecca for sure. Like I was really interested to see between doing the comics and the show and seeing how the podcast would grow during the show, which it clearly has. Hats off to you guys for, I think you guys have crushed being a very niche character podcast and getting a TV show worked in. I've been really excited over the past couple of years listening to this show, hearing you guys speculating all the way back when it first got announced and to the point where you were doing 2 episodes a week and everything. It's just been really awesome to watch. So hats off to you guys for how you've done it.
Oh no, thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure, and it just love to just chat Moon Knight. I mean, it's exactly why Rebecca and I do it, and we're just fortunate enough to have a TV show. But we've also got beautiful comics coming up ahead. So Loonies, do not go anywhere. A big thank you again to our patronies. Look, you've got a couple of them over here. So a big thanks to Odin, Daniel, Drew, Frank, Justin, Derek, Kyle, Wayne, Jordan, Josh, James, Anthony, Russell, Michael, Mario, Gavin, and Matthew. I'd like to apologize for the likes of a big shout out to Tommy, the man on the streets. He was going to come on, but he couldn't make it. Just some family commitments. And a big shout out to Anthony Sitko. Happy 40th, Anthony. I hope you are getting backslappingly drunk as we speak. I just got reminded. So Tommy sent me. Let's just cap it off with Tommy's thoughts on the show. He says his brief speculation, I guess, or take. I quite enjoyed episode 6, while a wham bam thank you ma'am to the cliffhanger of episode 5. I'd much rather take this fairly tight 6-episode season that solidifies a future for the character than a drawn-out action fest with little character development. Khonshu decked out in a bespoke suit, the Spectre-mobile, and the Sienkiewicz facility were a lovely final piece of the pie. Layla acting as Taweret's avatar was a highlight, furthering the rabbit holes of the MC, and he's got Dan MU's mythos. Hawks assume death is a bummer. I'd take the rest wrapped with a bow. Thank you very much. I got everything I wanted out of this Moon Knight series. Couldn't be happier with the outcome. And finally, the introduction of Jake must signal a future for Oscar Isaac in the MCU. I'm thrilled to support the show and whatever may await Moon Knight in the future. Break a leg all with the recording. See you on the streets. So thank you, Tommy. Yes, very much it sounds like he enjoyed the show as well. So a huge thanks, Tommy, for leaving us your thoughts there as well. A big final thank you to Drew again, to Daniel Doing, he was just here, and Frank the Think Tank. Oh geez, I got to have Frank on the show again. He's a blast. Principal sponsors. You can follow Daniel Doing's Fringe Night at patreon.com/Fringe Night 27. Drew Toombs, you've got awesome music. Mario, get on it. Come on. Chad, get on it. SoundCloud.com/Toombs with a Z, and Lurk Music. Lurk Music with a CK.bandcamp.com. Fantastic music. And Frank the Tank's Instagram, Moon Knight Vision with a Z as well. Go check that out. All in the show notes. Finally, please follow or consider CLZ. They're a comic book database thingy. They're pretty cool at collectors.com, and Dreamland Comics, use the code MOON and get 20% off all their stuff. Finally, we are part of the collective. Fantastic bunch of shows. Props to each and every one of them. They're so fun to listen to. Go listen to Capes and Lunatics. Go listen to Inner Demons, a Ghost Rider podcast. Or also as well, I Am Your Target Demographic on YouTube. Adam does a great reviewing there. And finally, email us at feedback@itkmoonnight.com. We've got a website. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Discord, Get Vocal, and Podchaser. And if you want to leave a review, please do. It'll be good if it's high, but let us know if we need to change anything or how we can improve. We're always open to that as well. Guys, a huge thank you once again. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Mario. I'll see you online. Drew, I'll see you online as well. Power of Chad, I'll see you online. Or the next time we do a Let's Get Sheet-Faced, I'm up for that. Right. As always, everyone, thanks for listening. And may Khonshu watch over the denizens of the night. Catch you later.